to do a talk on how basically Bitcoin, blockchain, and AI come together and save our planet. Our planet is built on this insane idea of infinite growth on a finite planet. And this is provable by simply asking anyone who's in finances, what is compounded annual growth rate? It's a little bit of code that drives ROI, return on investment. It was invented as a means to attract wealthy landowners to invest their money into the Industrial Revolution and say offer infinite returns on your investment, because ultimately as businesses scale, they grow 3%, 4%, 5%. That's an exponential growth function. That's an infinite growth function. And the problem is our planet is a finite thing. There's only so much of it. And if you have a framework that basically treats our planet as infinite, then you see the outcomes that we're seeing. We're seeing climate change, deforestation, collapse of fisheries, collapse of coral reefs. All these things are simply outcomes of an endemically flawed system. All right, so now that I've talked about that, so how do you fix a system that's endemically flawed? You have to replace the system. Now, we have a problem there because ultimately, Wall Street isn't going to go, oh yeah, you're right, CAGR doesn't work. Let's find another way to evaluate shit. They're just going to laugh at you in the face. So I realized we need another sandbox. So I invented the sandbox. It's called the Open Innovation Framework back in 2010. But I couldn't get anyone to fund it. So finally, out of frustration, I said to myself, I wonder if these Bitcoin guys know anything about, because it's built on Bitcoin, a finite thing, a finite currency. And I'm the guy who coined the Bitcoin standard. And ultimately, the Bitcoin standard, it replaces all of fiat. So how do you do that? Well, it's really simple. You have you replace the corporation. Well, how do you replace the corporation? Why? By introducing a new kind of thing that starts things. Because startups become corporation, found-ups become these DAOs, what I call open, decentralized corporations that Vitalik would rename the DAO. So how does this fit in with Bitcoin? Well, really simple. Imagine any transaction that you do sequesters Bitcoin. So you can print all the fiat you want. You can print all of the shit coins you want, because there's only 21 million. And that Bitcoin becomes a representation of all the stuff you print. So everything kind of exponentially grows. That's fine, because Bitcoin is going to mirror the price of all these things, because there's only 21 million of it. So the system works really simple. Every time fiat comes into the system, it gets turned into Bitcoin, and it gets underwritten by the stable coin that's being held by that Bitcoin. And here's the other caveat, that the native token of this decentralized autonomous entity, which forms decentralized autonomous ecosystems, these are days all working together, underwrite that value by their native token. Now, their native token has some interesting characteristics. Number one is, if you take it outside the network, it's hit hard, right? Take it out to try to turn it into other tokens, you're gonna see a pretty hard hit. Number two is, if you try to hoard it, guess what? It also decays. So you can't hoard it and you can't take it out without taking big hits. So what can you do? Well, you can reinvest it into a day or into a found up. And these found ups, when you take your token and put it into a found up, then ultimately you're staking it in there, and you're stopping the decay. It's that simple. What does that do? It empowers innovation. You see, startups are all about monetizing a problem. A found up is about solving a problem, right? It's not about monetizing, it's about solving it. And then the token represents the value for solving it. It isn't about making money. It's about how that thing is impacting the planet, the living systems, and sharing with others. Because ultimately, if you're doing that in our system, that's called compounded annual benefit rate, or collective autonomous benefit rate, and it drives valuation. It's proof of benefit instead of proof of growth. Because ultimately, if we can show benefit to the planet, the living systems, and sharing with others, then we can tie ROI to it. It's really that simple. Now, you may say, well, how does AI play into all this? Really simple. There is too much information out there. So we need digital twins or digital clone that basically is you in digital format, filtering through all the stuff, not making a decision for you. Basically, it is you going through it. Voting, taking parts in a decentralized autonomous organization, taking your roles involved in that. There's no reason for you to do it yourself. You have your digital twin do it. So how do we build a digital twin? It's really simple. We build it from birth. That's why I have Capture the Baby, Capture Education. Because ultimately, what we're trying to do is guess how a baby is going to behave and how it's going to act. And ultimately also the parents, and being an assistant to parenting and to child rearing. Imagine if you had, a child psychologist every step of your way raising your child, or some, an entity with all of the knowledge on how to raise your children the best you can. Think of the value to that. Well, that's what Educating Intuitive Teaching Devices does. Simply by mirroring and imprinting, it teaches a child any language, and in doing so, it learns two important data sets for AGI. One of them being consciousness data set, and the other one being early learning. Now, I invented a new kind of communication called haptic sign. It's harmonic haptic sign, and it uses the harmonics of the mother or the parent who goes, "Hey, how are you?" That's my harmonic to my son. It's unique to my son, right? Everyone has their own harmonic. In a way, when the child hears and feels that, because there's a vibration to it too, it's like the AI is rewarding that infant with holding and stroking, right? It's giving it a hug. And the haptic sign, in a way, becomes a substrate layer of communication, because every noun is mapped to the haptic. So when you feel this haptic for apple, it's the same haptic for apple in any language, and so on, and same thing with verbs. Now the cool thing is with haptic sign, it evolves. So as the AI and you interact, it basically gets more and more complex. I want you to imagine this situation. You're there, you're a haptic baby like I am. We're both haptic babies, and we're having a conversation. So as we're having this conversation, guess what? Your AI is sharing your haptic history with me, and my AI is sharing my haptic history with you. So as we're having this conversation, I'm understanding you, your experiences, your growth, everything from very origin. And it's just I'm not even aware of it. I just feel it and I know it. I had this experience in ayahuasca, where in this ayahuasca there was a song, and I didn't understand the meaning of the song literally, but I knew the meaning. I knew the meaning deeply, inherently within my soul and system, and that's what haptic sign will do. Imagine everyone on the planet being a soulmate to one another. UnDaoDu.